I'm the publisher of New Hampshire Business Review, and welcome to our must-know 2023 hiring and compensation trends. As I think you're all aware, presuming you're joining us because you're either a person who might be looking to be hired or a person who's in charge of hiring people, but either way, the landscape for hiring has changed tremendously over the past couple years, and I think is still in the process of changing. And so we have an expert on the line with us today who is going to be able to walk us through those changes. The webinar today is sponsored by Robert Half and brought to you by Robert Half. And if we could jump to the next screen. From Robert Half, we have the Metro Market Director from the Finance and Accounting Practice Group, Travis Palmer. And Travis has seen it all across the board in terms of what's happening right now with both employee expectations and employer needs around those expectations. And so, Travis, why don't you jump up and join us?
Yeah,
welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Ernesto, and thank you to the New Hampshire Business Review team as well for letting me do this.
We're grateful to have you here, and I am really excited about this discussion because even in the conversations that we've had in the past about what you're seeing out there in the world, it's just fascinating. And as you know, somebody who's a hiring manager, it's been invaluable just to hear from you about this. So the way that we're going to do this today, Travis has a presentation he's going to take us through, and I'm going to hang around on the line and ask a few questions as we go. For our audience, please know that you can also ask questions straight through this as well. So we'll do some Q&A at the end, as well as a live demonstration of some of the salary tools that Travis uses with Robert Half. But in the meantime, if something jumps out at you and you want to ask, put that into the questions chat and I will ask on your behalf. So Travis, please take it away.
Yeah. Thank you. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this. I think, as Ernesto mentioned, it's something that is constantly changing. You know, every single month we're seeing a new report come out with, different, salary expectations or, an unemployment rate that has changed. So I'm going to go through some of that and just show you, ideally what we're seeing in the marketplace. And, Robert Half in general, we've been around since 1950. So, we've been doing the, publishing the, salary forecasts. Since then it started, by paper and PDF. But today we have it more so as a, walkthrough, something online that actually after this presentation, I was going to, pivot to that and show a little bit of, aspects to that and how to use it. And the different tools that are throughout that. And one thing that's great is, a lot of the information that are on these slides are also on that same site when it comes to the different trends and things that, we're going to get into. So ideally, countless managers, before we start off, sorry, countless managers, have utilized this, ideally for a lot of reasons, ideally mostly for, the ability to negotiate, but, our candidates are also utilizing it, employees use it to make sure that they're, in the right bracket for pay and what should be expected and what they're doing. So it allows, obviously both parties to benefit from, this data. But our agenda today is, as follows. First we'll touch on the hiring trends that we're seeing on a national as well as a more local level. I personally manage and oversee the administrative, accounting, and finance divisions. We also have a technology division. We have a creative division, legal division as well. But I thought, with it being accounting and finance, my expertise, but also knowing that technology has seen such a big uptick, I did include specifically more accounting, finance, and technology in these slides. But the website will have more specifics into a lot of different realms as well. Robert Half, we've been more specific in our professional staffing services, which ideally is anything in the office related, administrative, clerical, IT. So we don't ideally get into that labor or engineering side of the house. So that's one thing that you will not see there. But secondly, after going through that data, we'll dive into a little bit more of some examples of how organizations are, upping their ante a little bit, and how, they specifically are trying to, get, that acceptance offer from that candidate over that other client or that other company. So a lot of things that we're seeing is, a lot of different hiring practices, as well as DEI efforts. And then as Ernesto mentioned, we'll wrap up with a little bit of a Q&A. But so as for national trends, obviously 2020, we had a pretty big one with the pandemic, but we are seeing that is no longer the driving force behind work-related trends. Now we're seeing some other uncertainties like inflation, supply chain disruptions, fears of, recession, just to kind of name a couple. But despite all that, starting salaries are still trending upward, and, specifically sharply for some specific positions. So real quick, we'll take a look at some interesting facts and figures of, what we're seeing on a national level. In 2022 here, October, we saw the unemployment rate drop down to 3.7%. This is a, significant drop, from, last year this time, where it was at 4.7%. So it's dropped an entire percentage point, and it's actually closing in, pretty close to what we saw during, pre-pandemic. In February 2020, unemployment rate was at 3.5%. So we're really nearing close to that, that rate again. Some other interesting facts, when it comes to unemployment, unemployment rate for workers with a college degree is at 1.8%. And then as for job openings, 10.7 million across the nation. And then, we're seeing, the quit level continue to rise, and a lot of resignations, with, and companies having a hard time keeping that retention, seeing the quit level at 4.1 million. More on a local level, unemployment rate here in New Hampshire, 2.2%. And unemployment rate in Manchester specifically, 2.3%. And job vacancies right now in New Hampshire, 48,000.
Travis, do you see any of that changing with any of those national trends changing with the sort of the rise in interest rates and the sort of the action that the Fed's taking to control inflation? There've been news stories recently where I believe the Fed chief was saying stop raising wages, and that was an inflation driver. And so is this something that you guys are beginning to see?
I would say, when it comes to, this is kind of a different time than we've ever seen, staffing for sure. I know every situation is different, but, when it comes to, companies right now, like we are still seeing companies hiring aggressively. We're still seeing a lot of job postings and not enough talent to kind of fill those job openings, which unfortunately just what that does is that just drives the competitive piece to it. And what happens, that kind of in turns goes to salaries. We for sure during the pandemic and as the real estate boomed, we definitely saw some upticks in certain industries, specifically financial services, anything within the loan or title companies, for example. Like you definitely saw those like upticks specifically into those certain positions. But hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, and then just one other follow-up. This slide that's talking about the unemployment rate in New Hampshire at 2.2%, which is very low. can we extrapolate from the prior slide that it's even lower for college educated?
Yeah, the college, so college educated in general or nationwide is 1.8%. Now, I don't have that number for specifically in New Hampshire on what that might be, but you can only imagine if it's 3.7, it's a 1.8. I would assume, we're looking somewhere around 1% flat, if anything, but if it correlated.
Striking.
It is, definitely is. And I think we've mentioned it too, when we talked before, like New Hampshire is just in a place where, we're so close to Boston. We're so close to the tech hub that's down, closer to Cambridge in that area. So, there's just, unfortunately, we're battling with that. And just in general, other companies, and I'll show in some slides, the percentages of some companies that are deciding to move into that remote model because, there's a high number of employees that are just leaving because they are being more forced to go back in the office, or they're just open to leaving and hearing about other options because, the current place that they're in isn't providing maybe that more flexible work schedule. So how, this kind of goes into what we were just mentioning, how are employers attracting, those skilled candidates? I mean, hiring is definitely number one for most employers right now. And that's because, the quits, as we're seeing, and the resignations aren't stopping. And, obviously that doesn't account for retirements or, transfers or other types of separations that might happen. But, to replace, those departing employees, employers are using a variety of strategies. For example, 46% of them are, providing a higher starting salary. 34% are providing signing bonuses, more flexible work options out of 33% of them. And then, when it comes to the ability to hire, remote candidates, those clients that they're doing so. So, 31% are doing that. And then, outside of this list, I mean, certain steps, just to kind of mention a couple that we're seeing from clients and what they're doing, they're helping workers add skills and reach career goals. So either they have a program in place that allows them to have certain career settings, certain career goals that they can hit. Another step is boosting morale, the environmental, social, and governance efforts, of the company. As I mentioned before in the slide, and we'll go into it more deeply later on, but working toward diversity, equity, and inclusion in their workforce. But obviously that can attract employees, but these are abilities to obviously keep strong retention efforts as well.
We did have a quick question from the audience, and just before we get too far past the slide that you were talking about, we had an audience member who was curious if later you're going to show a breakdown of what industries in New Hampshire have those 48,000 job openings, and if you weren't going to cover that later, maybe you have a sense of that now. Like, what are the industries that are most critically understaffed?
I would say I do have a couple slides that go into that more specifically, just kind of, especially in accounting and finance, where are we seeing the biggest boom and uptick of those jobs specifically, and then I have it in the technology as well as the administrative clerical. But I would say biotech, finance, tech, any sort of tech security type stuff. We've seen a big uptick in that. Public accounting for us, obviously Robert Half, we're known more so for the finance and accounting, but the public accounting sector is where when we talk to clients, we see the most stress, just because of being short-staffed, the competition that a lot of those other bigger firms are making them try to obviously have higher salaries than they've ever seen before, but also they need to start working smarter. So we'll go over that a little bit, but those two specifically, I would see. We did see a boom in the construction and manufacturing. I would say for New Hampshire, manufacturing is probably a bigger piece of that. For the open jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've all seen it, I'm sure, when we're out and about, retail and restaurant work. We see employment signs all over the place, and that alone has caused some competition. I mean, you can see even fast food restaurants or even Panera offering $15, $16 an hour. So I think that alone just has brought some more competition and obviously more holes in those positions.
Okay, thanks.
And with employers increasing starting salaries, this has caused some pay compression. So, I mean, I'm not sure if anyone, has experienced that, but ideally that's when, new hires are earning, more than the employees that have been there longer, that are in the same or maybe, similar roles. So, with that, we've seen 60% of employers say that employees have raised concerns about the issues. And then out of those, 82% of senior managers have given raises to those that have, expressed those concerns. So obviously with, the raise in those salaries and keeping those those employees, that's once again, just strengthening, retention. And I think that's one thing that a lot of clients are seeing now, more so in the last few years, especially going through the pandemic, the importance of having somebody that is more in that, and you'll see slides later, 75th percentile, which to me means the person that is quintessential to the business. They've been around, their industry experience, they're the go-to person for that certain position or need that might be needed in that role. So obviously, it's much more difficult to find somebody off the streets or to find somebody coming in being able to, even compare to what that other individual is doing. So by increasing these salaries, you're ensuring those experts that you have in the field and those experts that you have on your team are going to definitely stay. And as for retention, retention is retaining its importance, right? That's kind of like the definition of it. Besides giving raises to employees, a lot of clients have been increasing compensation in general. 52% of them have, while 46% of them, have increasing by doing that. It's increasing a lot of more recognition efforts, and then 45% of them are allowing more a remote or hybrid work schedule. Those savvy or those employers that might be a little bit more ahead of the game, those are the ones that are noticing, that most employees obviously like to be recognized for their efforts, right? But also, finding happier work-life balance for the candidates at home and allowing those remote work options or those hybrid options when available. And so we call this ideally flexible work, right? It's the idea that the candidate has the ability to have a little bit more flexibility in their schedule. We saw these certain things kind of boom in general, or this idea boom through the pandemic. And because of them, the flexible work is now more so an expectation among employees versus a perk. So, and there are many factors, obviously the work-life balance, the long commute times, but obviously what's most challenging for employers, I would say, is how do they work towards this model? Because it's obviously when you have people that have been there for some time, obviously those might have more of the trust factor that you have for them to be able to do the work from home and just have more of the knowledge, right? But obviously if you have positions where individuals need more of that supervision, need more of that support, that is where those positions are. Obviously we're seeing more on site, more hybrid schedule eventually, maybe after the training period is passed. But in what we've seen is in general, with that we've seen higher retention from people staying in those jobs when clients are moving to that hybrid or remote schedule. But also, the candidates themselves and the employees, they've shown that they can be successful in those seats as well. They've been doing it since, the pandemic in March 2020. And obviously, we've only seen, that grow as a practice. But also with that, I think we've seen clients and companies being able to figure out how that model works to the best for them, but also for their employees.
Travis, have you seen companies having to sort of navigate the situations where there may be sectors in their company of employees that can work remotely or have flexible schedules, and others for whom that's not possible because of the nature of the job, and how they're sort of dealing with morale issues around that when you've got essentially two sort of classes of people with different expectations around them?
Great question. I haven't seen anything more specific around where a company has necessarily just allowed a certain department to do it. I would say, for example, like the technology realm and the creative realm, any of the marketing side, I think they've already been doing it pre-pandemic. And they've already, we've seen if there's any jobs be hybrid or remote, it's more in the managed services, like more the technology side for sure. So, I would say, as I mentioned before, yeah, there's still definitely those positions where we see need to have more of that, I would say, supervision, whether that's more call support, call center type positions. We're definitely seeing those, receptionists, front desk, our healthcare, for example. That has never changed. If anything, it's gotten busier, since the pandemic. And those are, there's no way that those have ever moved over more remote, especially those front desk positions, as, the check-in, the requirement of verifying somebody, the requirement of seeing them in person, making sure it's them, signing certain documentation. So, I think there are definitely certain jobs, that those client-facing ones, which unfortunately I don't think will ever change, just because they need that face-to-face interaction. We are seeing, I think it comes down to a little bit of experience too, Ernesto, because we're seeing a little bit more of our clerk, lower level transactional type positions. Those are the ones that we're seeing need to be more so on site to help along with the training, to help along to get with the flow of how the business runs, where, obviously maybe a controller or a senior staff accountant that has been with the company for some time, has a little bit more visibility on how to do the job entirely. They're the ones that are able to go and work from home a little bit more often. And some of my slides ahead are going to show a little bit more on the percentages of certain clients that are actively looking to find more of a remote hybrid versus some that aren't.
Okay, thank you. And just a side note, a little administrative note. We had a question from the audience as to whether or not the fully recorded webinar will be available later. It will. Perhaps not with our pre-webinar practice discussion, but the rest of it will be okay.
Perfect. And then here's some figures to consider when it comes to kind of remote and hybrid schedules. 60% of employees work on a fully remote or hybrid basis right now. 41% of senior managers told us that employees have quit rather than return to the office full time. And we saw this locally with some clients that just set a date. This is when you need to be in. And it was, sure enough, we as recruiters saw an uptick from those certain clients of candidates that were looking for work. And we saw an uptick from orders from those clients looking for candidates because it was hard for them to find candidates to come into the office full time.
Hey, did you get a lot of applications from Twitter recently?
Funny you say that. Again, we have spoken to some recruiters. We've had some that, I know I had one personally that worked for me 2 years ago out of the Portsmouth office that worked for, Meta and Facebook a little, and was, looking for a little bit. So we have seen a little uptick from some of those higher technology giants for sure.
Are these figures from New Hampshire only, or is this more of a global, or not global, but national set of
This
numbers?
is a national look. Yep.
Numbers. Okay.
Yep. Now, obviously with, with this, I do like to mention, obviously, correlation isn't always necessarily causation, but, it's hard to ignore a little bit of how these numbers align, and in addition to them, 52% of workers want more flexibility in determining which days of hours they work. And then some additional figures just to consider. 41% of employees said they plan to look for a new job within the next year. Of those 41%, 54% of them prefer a fully remote position, while 55% are open to hybrid schedules. I mean, when you read these numbers, I mean, you can see obviously, more than half of the workforce is just looking for a flexible work of some type. And obviously, we've seen candidates be a little bit more in control of the job market right now, given how low the unemployment rate is. And obviously, they're just being a little bit more selective about which jobs, they are looking to select. Flexible work is more than where people work. It's also when, right? So, flexible scheduling includes flex time. You might have heard that term, or windowed work. We use block scheduling here. Is a term that we use for our company. But ideally, it's just, it's giving some sort of options that might differ from your typical 8 to 5 schedule. The employees that, typically love, options, obviously, they give, better work-life balance. Maybe gives them time for personal matters that, might only be able to be done during stated business hours. And we're seeing, in general, their enthusiasm is definitely reflected in their work. 56% of workers said flexible scheduling has increased their morale, while 32%, nearly 1/3, said that it's helped them be more productive during working hours. Now, the next slide I have is actually a little bit more of an interactive one. So if you have your chat box open, fantastic. If not, don't worry about it, or now's your time to get to it. But, we did a fun survey, throughout, the nation for Robert Half, and, we wanted to kind of, see, obviously we're seeing a little bit more companies doing a compressed work week. And meaning a 4-day work week. So we asked a variety of managers what percent of them think that they envision their company moving to a 4-day work week. I can read these if you know. A is 9%, obviously goes up. B is 14%. C is 37%. D is 45%, and E is 64%.
So people can make their guess in the chat if they want.
Yep.
All right. Anybody out there who wants to speculate? I see them all coming in as questions. Let's see. We've got multiple votes for C. We've got one guess on B, 2 guesses for B. C is winning at the moment. We've got 2 Ds in here, but C is I would say, clear winner.
Okay.
In terms of the numbers that have come in.
Well, the answer is E.
Whoa.
64% can see their company moving to a 4-day work week within the next 5 years. Now, this is a national thing, so maybe maybe New Hampshire might be more closer to that C. Obviously, some of the metropolitan areas, the bigger cities and stuff, obviously they and obviously, maybe even just those technology type companies, that's where we're seeing a lot of those 4-day work weeks. But yeah, and that's within the next 5 years. Sorry, I didn't mention that. So it's within the next 5 years. So obviously it's not coming in the next year or something like that, but within the next 5 years, 64% of them.
And these you said these are New Hampshire figures, or
No,
not
these
national
are
figures?
correct.
Yes.
I would assume the New Hampshire ones might be a little bit less, just given the type of positions that we see, and being in the market. We're still seeing a majority of them, work under a 5-day work week, but there are some that have already picked up the trend.
Do you know if those companies that are moving to 4-day work weeks are moving to 4-day 10-hour days, or are they moving to 4-day 8-hour days and just?
They're still doing 40 hours within the 4 days. Yep.
Okay. Yep.
Still getting in the full week. Now, on the next slide, and it's going to be something that you see a little bit on our salary guides when I present it, but thought we'd dive in a little bit more specifically to the accounting and finance, and then we'll do the same for the technology and the customer support administrative. On these slides, as you see, just to kind of give just to explain a little bit, we have 3 different categories: the 25th, the 50th, and the 75th. So the 25th is ideally somebody more new to the role, someone that obviously has some experience, but is going to need a little bit more of training, or just needs a lot more instruction and supervision on a day-to-day basis. The 50th percentile is somebody that they do have some experience on the subject matter. They can perform consistently, independently, without a supervisor being directly over them. And then the 75th value, 75th is the value to the company. I think I explained that a little bit earlier. They're quintessential. Maybe they have something very unique or specific in their background that just makes them that much more successful in that position, where you couldn't be without that sort of that skill set. So picked just 2 specific job types, staff accountant, just the general accountant, and obviously the senior internal auditor. We've been seeing a lot more auditing type work being done as well. So I'd say these are 2 of our upticks for sure. And then with that, as I mentioned, these are the different ranges as the lower, the median, and the higher end of what we're seeing in salaries for those ranges. And as for trends, specifically in finance and accounting, firms are growing for sure, as their teams, as the companies expand to different initiatives, obviously. But 51% of senior managers plan to add new staff in the coming year. And the biggest need that we're seeing out of this, for sure, is more the financial planning and analysis. So definitely 50% are saying that majority or half of them, I would say, are saying that those are that's where the biggest uptick has been. And then, but unfortunately, out of those managers, 54% are reporting that they are seeing increased quits within their team and within their company. The ability to grow your teams and business initiatives may hinge on that flexible work week that we discussed earlier. 27% of workers looking for jobs in the fields of accounting in finance are considering fully in-office roles. So only 27% of job seekers within accounting and finance will take a job that's on site, or considering jobs on site. So 73% are looking for some sort of flexibility. I'm not saying they're all looking for fully remote, but just some sort of flexibility, if that's a hybrid or a fully remote offer.
Are employers are employers that are trying to win that much smaller pool of candidates who will consider fully in office doing other things to try and sway them? Are they paying, is offering more compensation? Are they offering other kind of perks?
Yeah. So compensation was a big one. I think the other one is benefits and different perks on that side that they're giving to their employees. And then other ways of doing it is just a lot of I would say support in a way of showcasing their employees. So recognition is big. That's a big way, as well as I think the other one ideally was like career growth and path. Some sort of element and way to enhance their skills, not just doing being at their same level, right? But yeah. So and then what's staggering too is 54% of companies require employees to be in the office full time still within the finance industry. And public accounting, as I mentioned, is probably the where we're seeing a lot of the stress, and a big part of that, recruiters across the nation are constantly saying that, or hearing from the firms that they're short staffed, specifically in auditors and public accountants, especially those that are holding a CPA. And what's happening is with those short staff, you're just adding more workload, longer hours for certain employees, which is just putting you at risk for burnout on those employees, but also just risk of turnover. Two of the most, as I mentioned, positions that are seeked out for auditors and public accountants, those with CPA. So if you have some on your team, make sure that those are the ones that you're watching and keeping control over the most, and making sure they're happy, because those are the ones that we're seeing leave that industry more often, and find a different opportunity, not industry, excuse me, leave that those firms to find a different job. And to counteract this, a lot of firms are trying to lock in accounting students early on in their college careers, whether that's I know of a couple clients specifically that are working with UNH to do a lot of the interviewing and the mock interviews, or the career fairs that they do over there. That's a way to engage with those students beforehand, try to obviously more incentives, paying and assisting them to get to their CPA, whatever it might be. But a lot more firms are trying to get ahead of it, which is big. And then a big piece of it is sign-on bonus. We've seen a lot more public accountants go into more, offering the sign-on bonuses again for those specific candidates that are must-haves for them to be successful as a firm. If you're bringing on this person that's going to help you, for sure bring in a lot more business in the long end and long term, like this, like let's grab them now. This is a way to do that, and offering some, a little bit more of an incentive to get them in here.
This is a sort of a question, is maybe displays a strange gap in my knowledge, but with a sign-on bonus, what is the penalty if somebody leaves after they've accepted a sign-on bonus? Do they have to pay it back?
Typically, the sign-on bonuses, they come with a time frame. So there is usually some like a certain amount of time the person has to be there before they collect on it. So they can say there's a sign-on bonus, like you might hear a $3,000 sign-on bonus to come and work here. Mm-hmm. But I would assume it's not $3,000 up front.
I see.
It's going to be a chunk of that, maybe 500, and then you get the original, and then you'll get maybe 2,500 after 3 months.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
That's how I've heard of it, more often. Okay. So it's kind of ensuring the person is there, right? And getting a little bit more, I guess, assurance out of it.
Right. Makes sense.
And then financial services, as I mentioned, we're seeing a big uptick. But, I would say top specialties: risk analysis, compliance, auditing. That's the highest demand in this sector. The ideal candidate is within 3 to 7 years in this field, which again is kind of harder to find. Those are the harder areas to find, and that's where you'll most likely find that 75th percentile of candidate, because they are that experienced within that expert in that certain skill set. But with experienced people in short supply, 71% of managers are looking to hire more entry level, as I mentioned in the last slide, in the public accounting, getting after them a little early so that they can train them as they go. And with those, we're seeing a lot more of a on-site for the first couple months, working into a hybrid schedule. So we're seeing an uptick in that specifically with those lower entry-level candidates, just to ensure they're getting a good amount of training and experience under their belt before, they're given that opportunity. And then the hot jobs, like the industries I know it was asked for, these I would say are our hottest, companies that or industries we're seeing, and the open jobs for sure. It's going to be the biotech, construction, finance tech, fintech is what it's called. Insurance, still seeing an uptick in that. And then nonprofit has been big with a lot of the certain initiatives the government has been given out. We've seen an uptick specifically here in New Hampshire for Robert Half of a variety of nonprofits, utilizing our services. And then, when it comes to the type of positions we're seeing from top to bottom, the top one we're seeing definitely AP/AR clerks. That transactional AP is definitely something that we're seeing a lot, and around this time of year, always we see an uptick from AR companies looking to, try to, reconcile and get as much in as they possibly can. And with these top positions, like these are ones that you're going to see are seeing a higher range in salaries that you've ever seen before, because they are, a hot commodity. And some candidates are seeing 2 to 3 offers from different, clients in these, and obviously once it goes from there, it goes, well, what am I making? And then what are the perks and benefits of the company? Some skills and accreditations that you'll see that you should realize you're going to pay more for: any sort of ERP system that someone has experience with, a CPA, obviously, somebody with an MBA. You're just going to find more, probably more, obviously, I would say Excel experience within those master's programs, ability to do a lot more analysis. As I mentioned, analysis is a big hot commodity right now. And then QuickBooks. A majority of our companies are those small and medium-sized companies that are still utilizing QuickBooks. And it's really important to have somebody that is skilled. And if they are saying that they are, skilled and have the experience in it, then any of these sort of things you're going to see will be a reason for an uptick in salary. And then as for the trends in technology, same idea that from before. Obviously the different levels of a lower end, median to higher end. The highest we've seen is desktop support analyst. The next highest we've seen is a web developer. When it comes to an uptick in what type of jobs, and obviously here are those different ranges based off of the experience level of those candidates within those fields. And IT faces a whole different kind of challenge. As I mentioned, you can probably see those jobs remote more often than not, but a lot of tech companies are still rapidly growing, and obviously it outnumbers the available type of candidates that they have. 62% of tech managers plan to expand their teams in the coming year, and 88% of them said it's challenging to find those skilled professionals. And then driving these two factors, obviously starting salaries in the field, and that unfortunately doesn't really solve the problem of the talent shortage. 79% of these tech managers are turning to more contractors to fill in some skill gaps when needed, and 72% plan to expand their use of contract workers in the next 12 months. These are the top 4 managed IT services that our companies are, having a tough time staffing, something where they're seeing the most challenges. And the top one is IT operations. Next is data security. Digital marketing comes next, and then closely followed by digital innovation. This is where, I mentioned, the career goals and setting expectations and ability to have people move up. IT, this is like, if you don't have a plan to help develop some of your people and help them go to get some different skills, and the more likely they're going to leave, because there's going to be other companies that are offering those. So, I would say a strong professional development program is an all-around win and an investment for any company. It's a top factor that candidates look for when considering a prospect employer. They feel that they're growing professionally and they have advancement opportunities. So they're more likely to stay with their company. And then, your in-house team just develops skills that they just wouldn't get anywhere else. Allows them to have the best practices that are out there right now, which obviously just turns around and boosts the efficiency while reducing the retention risks. 41% of tech managers said they're expanding professional development to aid retention. And it appears to be working, as 68% of tech workers said that they, have had opportunities to build on leadership skills. And then, talent definitely comes at a premium. I know, obviously as we said, the salaries are going up. And they don't, the certain in-demand skills don't come cheap. But, just some numbers here, 43%, 58% of tech managers said they're adding salary premiums out of, for these in-demand roles. And the top 3 in demand were software development, process automation, and then 34% came in at cloud architecture and operations, data science, and database administration. And then these are the top jobs in technology, as finance, healthcare, insurance, manufacturing, just to name a few. And then the top positions that we've seen in those fields, as well as the top skills that we mentioned, where you're most likely to see yourself needing to, either pay more to have this type of skill set, but also if you don't have your team, with these skills and certifications, that's where the development plan comes into play, allowing them to be able to achieve these certifications or these certain skills within your company. Just as a purpose for time, Ernesto, I'm going to skip the administrative and customer support piece on this, because I want to get to a little bit more of the, you mentioned how other companies are, hiring, and what else are they doing besides salaries? What can they do? Here's a list of how, we see how, employers list, their benefits as the most important. On the left side is the blue. First off, health insurance, paid time off, and then life insurance, A&D, retirement savings, dental insurance. But then on the other side is where workers rank the benefits that they want most for the jobs. And obviously not too far off, certain things in there that, are where they see as being a little bit more important than others. But, this is a place where, a lot of employers are, giving more on the benefit piece to try to attract more talent if they can't attract it on the salary piece. And
on
then,
that paid time off, it's interesting, the top 2 there, health insurance and paid time off. I think it seems like there was a period where maybe health insurance has always been an important piece of compensation, but where maybe it wasn't as generally visible as how much a company's usually contributing to make that health insurance piece happen. And is that Is that something that you feel like maybe has become more visible to employees as the overall discussions about healthcare costs have become so much part of the forefront of the national discussion?
For sure. And I know our perm team, that's like one of their first questions that they ask a client when they're working with. What is your health insurance and benefits? And do you have to provide for the candidate when they're trying to find more on what it is? Because it's that those are the perks that are going to get people to definitely, want to do it, but also, those are definitely easier jobs to fill, and we have the candidates because especially if a client's up front say, yeah, we take on all the costs, we have a plethora of candidates to send them that are looking for that specifically.
Yeah,
So,
and then on the paid time off is also interesting because I am seeing, I think, nationally as a trend, some companies moving toward unlimited sick time and unlimited vacation time on the assumption that people will not use it in a way that limits their capacity to do their job. Are you seeing that as a trend with any of the employers you work with?
I haven't seen a ton of, I've heard about it. I haven't seen it enough. But I do know, I saw a stat, I forget where I saw it from, but you'd be like, to your point, you'd be surprised how many people actually just let their paid time and their, vacation time go because they're working, and it obviously it's not something that, as an employer, I don't like to see that. I want my team to be able to take their time off. But I mean, that shows, employees that really like their job, they want to do their job. And obviously, I think it kind of like works its way out in a way for sure. Cause I think you're going to still, if you give that kind of flexibility and that trust, you're just going to have, more morale, a better morale with the people. But specifically, I can't speak to it just because I haven't seen it a ton on that here
Probably means it's not as widespread of a trend
as
as
they.
it's reported to be.
Yeah, very possible. I'm sure there's a handful of companies out there that definitely do it. More than a handful. Just to attract that talent. And then which perks are popular right now? I think it's interesting that the workers are on the left and the employers are on the right. So flexible work schedules, remote work options, stipends for home offices. That's something that we've seen a big uptick in. If they are working remote or hybrid, are you providing them the type of space, the type of supplies that they need? And then employee discounts. That's where we start seeing a little bit of a trend going down on the what the workers want most, and an uptick for the employers. And then one more quick question here for the audience. Speaking of working remotely, how many days per week do you think employees would like to work remotely? I would say it's definitely not A, 0. B1, C2, D3, E4, and E5 days.
Yes, everybody, please go ahead and drop your guess in the questions, and let's see what folks think. I'll put mine in there as well. Let me do a quick survey of these here. I think we have just about a tie between D and E.
And the answer is D, 3.
There we go.
Pretty close there. Yeah, it seems to be the sweet spot in general with what we're seeing.
That's interesting. It makes sense because it does provide that opportunity to still be in the office and connect with the people you work with and have the social aspect of work that I think is so important to some people's lives anyway.
Right.
Certainly mine. And at the same time, it gives you that flexibility.
And it's worth to have a conversation around because you don't know, like sometimes the person really just is looking for 1 or 2 days, right? Like what are they really looking for? What are they asking for? And what does that really look like for each company? And then we asked workers what they want more of from their employer, and 80% of them, obviously, that flexibility in where and when they work. 79% want more of a work-life balance. 59% want more professional development, like I mentioned, doing more of those skills, accreditations, or certain certifications that they might be able to get. And then 51% they want a company that supports employee well-being. So gonna go on. Just obviously, I know we talked about certain different types of flexibility. And remote work is no longer a perk, as I mentioned. It's more of an expectation. So 41% of employees plan to look for a new job, and 54% are looking for a fully remote position. And then 55% plan to work more with a hybrid schedule versus looking for a fully remote. I'm just gonna, I think I'm gonna skip on just a little bit, just because of time, and I want to make sure we show the salary guide. And some of this is a little bit redundant as we went into a little bit of the when is just as important as where when it comes to remote, and then the 4-day work week. So a little bit of this stuff can be a little bit redundant. So I did want to pass on to the diversity, equity, inclusion. A lot more companies are, looking to, are definitely embracing the DEI. It's, for example, creating pathways for diverse representation, promoting inclusive work environments, and then providing equitable access to opportunities and advancements. DEI, it definitely ranks high on workers' priority list. Employees across all demographics support DEI efforts with 86% saying that this is 80% saying that this is an important requirement when deciding whether to sign on with a company. And then many companies are focused on DEI. Those that were focused on it more a couple of years ago, there's definitely seeing an uptick in just in general with their applications and their candidate pool. 86%, the companies are taking actual steps to address DEI, which is great. And 85% company leaders are feel that the company should definitely be taking steps to support this. And then some, obviously, to how this, fits into the recruitment process, the corporate culture. A lot of them are posting jobs within, DEI related job sites, working with organizations dedicated to increasing access to opportunities, and then obviously promoting ENGs or employee network groups. Robert Half, across the nation, has created a couple of these sort of, ENGs as we call them, where we have, and they're created by employees and they're run by employees, for employees, versus something that's coming more for a corporate piece or corporate action. We have, certain, representatives in each one of those, ENGs that, obviously, bring together colleagues with common interests, receive, obviously significant funding and support, from the, obviously from the leadership team as well. As we mentioned in the last slide, 85% of them do believe that they want to, or that they should, increase their efforts on DEI. And then here's some alliances. If I thought are important to share if you haven't looked into them, just to obviously it provides more networking, recruiting efforts as well, and obviously gives a little bit more retention for those candidates that are there. And then some strategies for success. Obviously, major thing. Got to get that company leadership buy-in. That's critical. When it comes to just all levels of your organization, and accountability is important. set benchmarks, collect some DEI related data to see how strategies are working, which ones are, where you need to make improvements. Transparency is huge. Publicize the DEI initiatives that you have, the goals and the data with the entire organization. Really holding the company a little bit more accountable. And it allows the employees to hold, or just feel more engaged in the entire process as well. And then, DEI efforts shouldn't stay inside the company. Get involved with, your community. Have the, company can sponsor some events. Volunteer your time, your team's time, and the employees' time to do that. They definitely, see some good retention efforts there. So some key takeaways real quick that, I wanted to mention. First of all, thank you so much for hanging in there with me on this presentation. I know there's a lot of information there, and I know there's going to be a lot of information that you can find on the website that I'm going to share here. But, some key takeaways that, I think are important. Today's workers have choices, obviously, right? So to attract and retain them, employers need to sweeten the deal a little bit more on the compensation packages. We have our salary guides that can help you see where you line up to where others might line up. So that allows you to, really make sure that you're, grabbing the top talent. Job seekers want that flexibility, right? They're looking for that, whether it's remote or hybrid, they want that certain thing. It's, again, not really, necessarily something that is a perk. It's something that is now a requirement that clients need to consider, employers need to consider. Obviously the flexibility is good for not just workers, but employers too. We've seen some employers have some success in it as well. We, especially in the technology space, for those gaps, and skills that are just really needed. We've, for example, ERP implementations and things of that nature. We've really seen an uptick in that. So interim staff and managed services truly do help businesses grow and save money in the long term, especially if they have open positions that are just sitting there. This is a time that you can allow, contract work to come in and alleviate some of that gap and alleviate some of the stress of the team that you have there, just to ensure that retention as well. And then the last thing I'd like to mention is just the DEI efforts. It can make a big difference in, obviously the hiring piece, but the retention, job satisfaction. In my 9 years here with Robert Half, it's been the last 2 years, every single interview that I have internally, with an up and coming salesperson, that they're really interested in what our company is doing for their DEI efforts. So just be prepared to, explain that when you're in the interview process too. And if you don't have, a way to, explain that, just make sure, you're just a little bit more prepared on that.
I think that's a really interesting data point. Just the fact that people are asking you, it's not that you're presenting that as a hiring manager and saying, hey, this is something we're doing. It's that people are coming in and saying, I need to know what you're doing around this.
Seeing a lot more of it. And I like, luckily our company does a lot too. So I was prepared. And I specifically help our Northeast committee up here for the DEI. So I was a little bit more prepared to, for that question, which was great. But, it's what people are looking for, especially, the younger group, that are, starting to hit the workforce right now. And as we're seeing a lot more, the boomers retiring, and obviously, like we need to obviously, as employers, show that we have those initiatives in place just to attract that talent.
Yeah, and so I guess we've passed the top of the hour, and we do have some people hanging in with us. But if we've luckily already accomplished the Q&A. So if you wanted to show that website real quick, yeah. Just so that everybody who's still here, and of course, and for everybody who gets the recording, they'll also be able to see that website, and we can include a link to that as well.
The ability to share.
Let me see if we can give that back to you. There you go.
Perfect. So, can you see it? Let me make sure you can see it. You good?
Yes, we can.
So this is the homepage for the salary guide, and as I mentioned, a lot of the national trends and flexible work perks and benefits that I mentioned in this slide are easily found here. But if you're looking for something more specific, for example, let's go into the finance and accounting. As I mentioned, Robert Half has information on technology, marketing, creative, administrative, customer support, HR specific, healthcare, and legal. And within the finance and accounting specific, say we're looking at an accounts payable. Let's say we're doing accounting operations. We're looking in Manchester, New Hampshire. And so if we're looking at just an accounts payable clerk here, as we go into it with 0 to 2 years of experience, midpoint salary that we're seeing again, as I mentioned, that 25th, 50th, 75th percentile. If you are looking for the top talent, somebody that just seems top of their level and experience, but also tenure, like this, you're going to see them at the higher range, at the 54,000, versus somebody beginning, just starting out, maybe not much experience. Maybe they were a billing clerk before, maybe they were an administrator that did some accounting, but this is the way that they get into the AP work. That's where we're seeing a little bit more closer to that 43,000. But one thing that's good, and us as a company has the ability to utilize Career Builder supply and demand. So for example, as like for an accountant, like an accounts payable clerk right now, 15 miles within Manchester, New Hampshire, we're finding that there's 2 total candidates versus 55 job postings.
Wow.
So there'll be 2 available candidates for 55 job postings. So that just shows you the difference there. And if you're looking for somebody maybe with 3 to 7 years of experience of accounts payable, there's 14 total candidates available to 505 total job postings. And that's just in a 15-mile radius within Manchester, New Hampshire. So that is obviously a big selling point what we have when we talk to clients, like this is the market right now. Our understanding, maybe they haven't hired in the last 7 years, they didn't hire at all post-pandemic. These are the obviously the numbers that we have to give in the sense of what's out there and available versus what you're looking for, and also who else are you competing with, right? Because there's so many other companies looking for that exact same job. If you think you're the only person looking for an accounts payable in Manchester, think again, there's 505 job postings that are out there. So yeah, I think that's a really important piece to it. But this can be very, this is obviously very interactive, allows you to really dive in a little bit more into it. It does go into more about the trends in this specific skill set as well. And obviously the different, some different things that you can ask. There's 21 accounting interview questions you need to ask. So if you feel like you need to brush it up on what you ask for interviews, there's a lot of that information as well. And as well as assisting in job writing if you have having a hard time writing up a job description. There's also some key points in here as well for that.
That's a powerful tool. And so anybody who's looking to get to this, they just go to the roberthalf.com website.
Yep. So they go to the. I think I'm signed in. So ideally, what you do is when you first go into it, I think you do need to submit your first name, last name, your email. And we do want to know is how much should I pay? So if you're a client looking to how much to pay, or an employer, or if you're a candidate, how much can I earn? This is what it does, or this is how you get to those certain places. And when you click submit, it brings you right to that first page that I was at, and then it dives into the different professional fields that we have the information on.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Travis, and Thank you to Robert Half for sponsoring this webinar. I think the detail was invaluable for anybody who's out there trying to hire right now. Obviously for the specific categories that you were talking about, but I think this really gave us a sense of what's going on in hiring in general as well, and things companies should be thinking about, in particular those takeaways that you listed at the end. So thank you so much. Certainly I can attest that hardly seemed like an hour. It went by quickly. And thank you to all of our audience members who hung out. And for anybody who had to drop off, a copy of the recording will be available, and please feel free to share that with your friends and colleagues as well. On behalf of New Hampshire Business Review, I'm Ernesto Burden, the publisher, thanking Travis, thanking Robert Half, thanking all of you, and wishing you a wonderful end to your week and a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.